Hola, hola! Welcome to the White Rabbit Space, a playground for conscious creators, people who are awake to what is and isn't working in our world, who want to live a life of meaning, some of whom are helping individuals tap into their strength, others who are focused on creating fairer models to live by, ultimately to allow more people to thrive and live fulfilling lives. But this isn't going to come easy. It's going to take collective effort, individual work, and believing in a dream bigger than ourselves and stretches further than our lifetime. Each of the individuals I chat with here have inspired me in some way, and it'd be a shame if more people didn't benefit from their stories. I wish we could all sit around a bonfire and experience their passion face to face. But for now, the power of technology enables stories to reach far and wide. Today's topic is one of the heavier ones many of us struggle addressing in our lives: the topic of death, of mortality. If we haven't come close to it in our lifetime, we've either heard of the stories of people who have and how they turned their lives around, or maybe we've been struck by losing someone who we've loved and held dear. Many of us have also heard of the famous Steve Jobs quote, "If today were the last day of your life, would you want to do what you're about to do today?" I hope your answer is yes, more days than not, but if it's not, get back to why you're doing it and recalibrate. Shifts in our choices, even if small, if they are better for our heart and our mind, they are better for us and can lead to a lifetime that we can look back on and think, hell yeah, I did a pretty good job with my life despite the shit that came my way. And so today we have with us Chris Allen, founder of the Earth Medicine Experience in Cusco, Peru, who's going to inspire us about living more fully. Someone who's come back from the dead, quite literally, more than once, and is the embodiment of courage, strength, and compassion, topped with a dash of sarcastic humor. But it did take work, and it wasn't an easy road. The pandemic has made us grapple with the reality of death more intimately, for some more than others, but lurking in our psyche nonetheless. Chris shares his stories on death, healing, and redemption, having encountered 4 near-death experiences, in one of which he experienced a vivid and life-changing out-of-body experience. He has dedicated his life to working with people who seek deep healing from trauma, be it physical or emotional, working with those with addiction and depression, as well as working with leaders who have numbed out and are looking for a way to reignite their creativity and find purpose and meaning. Finally, Chris encounters several people who just want to know where we've come from and want a deeper understanding of the truth of the world we live in. Chris and his team facilitate ayahuasca ceremonies, among others, yoga, nutrition, and fitness retreats, combining ancient wisdom and modern-day knowledge. He explains the purpose of them and how to prepare. So come with us on this journey as we dig deep on topics that will inform our perception of life and death. Chris, I am so thrilled to have you on this show. We have a lot of ground to cover, so I think we should just jump right into it. When COVID-19 first kicked off, I was looking at the conversations happening in the networks that I kind of float in, and that's tech and innovation, the startup community, biofeedback, and spirituality. It was like schizophrenic personalities, you know? So you'd look at the
Well, yeah,
startup,
I know that feeling.
I'd look at the whole startup world and I'd look at all the messages going through, and everyone's about doing action. We've got to solve everything, fix everything. And the other side's no, we got to breathe into this and we've got to, make sure that the energy feels well and healed. And it's not about fixing the world. The world can fix itself.
That's a great point. The world can fix itself.
I mean, we've got to take action, but where are we focusing our attention? The quote I'd like to refer to that really sums it up nicely. It was by Buckminster Fuller, of course, Bucky himself, and he said, "You never change things by fighting the existing reality." So there's this concept of fixing that needs to vanish, and he said, to change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. So innovation and creativity, yes, super needed, but this concept of fixing what already exists, now that's a problem.
Yeah. George Carlin has a great speech about that, how the world's going to be fine because Mother Earth will take it all back one day. It ends up a thing where we're so caught in our ego that we're going to save everything. I think how can we positively impact the world, but we can't control anything except for how we interact with one another, and there's too many variables to just like come in and save the planet. But through doing things that you're talking about, raising the consciousness, affecting the leaders, and that's been my whole thing. Like I was telling you, like the people that we've had on the retreats, they work for Microsoft, for Boeing, they work in Silicon Valley. I work with those people, and it's not all about deep healing. It's about expanding your consciousness and being more creative and having new ways to approach problems, that it's not all about fixing it, but maybe learning to live with it and move around it as opposed to always trying to control.
And I think it also has a lot to do with loving ourselves or being at peace with ourselves. So a lot of times I see, and I used to be that person. It was a form of escapism where I didn't want to deal with certain things. And I feel like for leaders to be great in our time, we need to acknowledge when things are shit. And that refers to when we are not feeling good on the inside. Because this is just not about problems that one may be having in their business or in their community or in their, in their social circles, but how are you feeling on the inside? Have you acknowledged why you possibly feel that way? Have you maybe identified the triggers that you need to start becoming aware of so you don't go off on a tangent or you don't become depressed?
Well, yeah, the best problems to solve are personal problems first.
Thank you. Yes.
The majority of the problems in the world stem from, I believe, the mental health condition. There is a lot of mental illness. You see it all over the world right now, and that's sort of what drew me to Peru, as opposed to, I worked in Thailand for a while doing retreats where I'd work with a lot of business people and a lot of corporate types, and they didn't know how to relax. They didn't even know they had problems. They didn't understand themselves. I'd be teaching a yoga class and I'd say, raise your right arm, and they put their left foot up. They're just this. It's like they're constantly in their head. They're not in their body. They're not. So it's like, for me, it's like the fascinating work is like working with ourselves and approaching leaders and helping them address those patterns that you're talking about, the samskaras, the deep grooves of, because a lot of people, are really, I don't know how to word this politically correct, but I see a lot of people who are highly intelligent and driven, but they're emotionally stunted. They have no idea how to handle their emotional body, their energetic body, the things that they're just, because they're so cut off and they don't even realize it's a problem. So then when you have those people that are going to try to help solve the world's problems, they don't even know how to solve their own. They don't even know they have any. So it's kind of like, to me, the revolution that we need starts on an individual basis. Not all this finger pointing of other people and telling them these people need to do this. I mean, you see it now, like the US is on fire, as far as like, figuratively it's on fire. And, it's like the way this year started and everybody's blaming each other, and it's just going to continue a cycle. It's just the same cycle of everybody separates into groups, left or right, black or white, men or women, and they all just, and the reason that I like working with psychedelics is a lot of the times it smacks people out of nowhere, and then they realize, holy shit, like I've been looking at the wrong thing the whole time. Like I need to focus on me, and once I set the example, more people will come. Like the best leaders are people that embody their message. Nobody
Yes.
wants a fat
It's
personal trainer telling you like don't eat cookies
100%.
and work out, and they're like 30 pounds overweight. I don't know.
Exactly.
So it's like, yeah, it's
So
start working on yourselves.
So on that note, you mentioned about, you've got to embody what it is you want to do, your work in the world. So what would you say is your core?
Well, I've had a lot of change.
Mm.
I've recreated myself. Probably, I would say there have been at least 2 or 3 major life-changing events where I just completely went a different direction than I expected. So you asked me, like, I was reading all your questions that you sent me, at a very thorough list of the topics and things. And I would say that probably one of my main purposes, and it isn't even something that I chose, it was almost like it was chosen for me, is basically just being an advocate for mental health issues, and also an advocate for plant medicines and psychedelics.
Mm-hmm.
Those to me, and it's based on personal experience. It's only based on how I've healed myself. Because, like, I always joke with people, I tell them I have a black belt in trauma. Like, what do I know best? I know trauma. I know trauma really well. I know mental illness really well on a very intimate basis. So, I mean, I can get into that. I have a very interesting story, but what I can do is I can put it into a sort of a Cole's Notes version of what brought me along. Mm-hmm. So the reason I'm so interested in trauma has been with my own personal experience. When I was 8 years old, I was just a kid. I contracted a strange virus, and the doctors didn't know what it was at the time. So this was my first experience with quarantine. I was an 8-year-old child who was put in quarantine for about a month in a hospital where nobody could visit me unless they had complete protective gear. I had a gland on the side of my throat that basically blew up the size of a softball. So for a month, I suffered in isolation in quarantine, and the doctors didn't know what I was suffering with, what the ailment was. And eventually one day I started to heal from it, and I was released. So, that was my first encounter with quarantine. That's why it's been so interesting during this quarantine to see, it's a little bit different when you can quarantine, you can work out at home and do things. When you're in the hospital quarantine, it's a very different flavor, different experience. So very traumatic for an 8-year-old, because you constantly, it gets in your head that there's something wrong with you. So mm-hmm. That's one of the first scars of there's something wrong with me. There's something like I need help. I'm sick. There's something wrong. Mm-hmm. And I started playing that. A year later, I was involved in an accident where I had a bucket of gasoline kicked on my legs. It was on fire. A bucket was on fire. I suffered third-degree burns to about 60% of my legs. This was when I was 9 years old. So I spent my 10th birthday in a children's burn unit. I spent about 3.5 months in a burn unit and underwent skin grafting, all kinds of surgeries, very painful, burn bath every day, which is a saline solution, where they basically scrub your skin with a wire pad to remove the gangrene skin to prepare for surgery. So very traumatic. It's probably one of the worst pains I've ever felt. During that time, recovering from the burns, you start to itch, because I don't know if you've ever had a burn before. Yep. The hard part of the burn is it itches like
the scabs.
Oh, it's horrible. So as a 9-year-old, I'm told don't scratch your skin because you'll ruin the skin grafts. And of course, as a 9-year-old kid, you want to itch. There's an itch, so you want to scratch it. So they had to basically tie me to the bed for the recovery that I wouldn't rip the skin grafts off. So there was a lot of really traumatic things that happened to me during that time. But also, if there's a hell on earth, it would probably be the children's burn unit. You have infants screaming and crying from their burns, and I can only so much respect and love for the nurses that do that job, because I can only imagine what the burnout rate of that is and the nightmares it causes. I'll come back to this story, but there was something that happened when I was in the burn unit. A child in the room next to me was there, and it would scream for days until eventually one day it stopped screaming. And I asked the nurses, "Oh, is the baby okay?" And they're like, "No, the baby died." So it created another, the first with the virus, and then going into the burns, I started having reoccurring nightmares of being back in the burn unit with this infant child screaming, and I was crawling down the hallway, and I could never get to the baby. So that's something that I had dealt with for probably 2 decades. And I'll share more later when I get into plant medicines and how it helped me heal from that. So after the burn unit, basically, I didn't know what PTSD was, but I was basically a 10-year-old child who had already had complex PTSD, which led to depression, all kinds of problems. Like the burn unit was horrible. I started getting into problems with drugs and alcohol as a very young kid, so 12 years old. I started smoking pot. I started drinking, whatever drugs I could get my hands on. And I didn't understand any of it because after the burns, I had to learn how to walk again. So the main focus was only on the physical. It was all about, I need to heal myself. I need to get my physical body up. I need to learn how to walk again. I had to go through the whole, where they have the crane, where they put the little thing where you can lean
Yep.
on and you can learn how to walk. And I went through all that. The main focus was that. And not once as a 10-year-old child did any adult come and say, would you like to talk about what happened to you? Like, how do you feel? Like, none of it was addressed. It was just like, okay, go back to school now. And you were talking about panic attacks. I mean, talk about panic attacks. I mean, I couldn't be around fire for like a year because it would bring up all these horrible memories. So then I started getting into trouble, and it pretty much from the age 12 to 17, 18, I ran wild. I mean, I left home when I was 16 years old. I started, getting into fights. I started selling drugs. I went down a really horrible path, and I didn't understand what was wrong with me because it was obviously there was something wrong because I couldn't sleep. I was having nightmares. I was constantly on edge and really cranky, and all I knew how to do was self-medicate. So I did that, and I ended up getting in quite a bit of trouble for selling drugs at a public school. So when I was facing, court and the police, I was a young offender, and they gave me the choice if I wanted to, go to a private military school to try to reform. So I obviously took that choice. I completely turned things around. I started playing on the rugby team. I was coaching everybody with jiu-jitsu and wrestling, something I'm very passionate about. And I was doing all that, and I managed to turn my life around for the better. I got enlisted. I got accepted at Dalhousie University, which is in Halifax, Nova Scotia. It's a pretty famous university. And I was studying psychology and nutrition. And, with the thought of I always wanted to be a sports psychologist because I was always fascinated about how some people rise to a challenge and some get crushed.
Yep. Yeah.
That you meet certain personalities that are full of excuses and others find solutions. And it was always like, I was like, wow, like the mind is a really powerful thing. And I knew there was something wrong with mine. So I was like, how do I maybe fix it? Right. That's what I felt like. So I had turned things around. I was in my second year of classes, and I was involved in a head-on car crash. So this was probably my first, you asked me one of your questions, my first awakening. I had been working shift work at a factory to pay for my university. So the shift work leaves you very tired. You're working 12-hour days. Sometimes it's midnight till noon or noon till midnight, very physical manual labor. And I fell asleep at the wheel driving into my first week of classes. And I was involved in a head-on car crash. I was going about 110 kilometers an hour. There was a woman coming the other way, and we both head on.
Wow.
And she was pronounced dead, dead on impact. And me, what had happened was after the impact, there was it was an Oldsmobile car, which has what's called a coach seat. And the coach seat means that the passenger and the driver's seat are connected on a sliding thing, so they both move together. Well, as we hit, that slid forward, sucked my legs under there, blew my pelvis open, so I had an open book fracture of my pelvis, cracked the pelvis in the back, butterfly fracture of my left femur, which just shattered, right femur, clean break, right ankle, compound dislocation, left foot, all the metatarsal bones completely crushed, collapsed the lung, tore 2 layers of my aorta, and had tons of scarring from metal and glass. But on the impact, I basically spun out and the car went into the ditch. And what happened, and this is what sort of took me down the path of plant medicine, is when you're born, you have a release of DMT because DMT is in our body naturally.
Yep.
When you die, you have a release of DMT.
Mm-hmm.
However, you can also have a release of DMT on a near-death experience. So you hear about these near-death experiences, and if you research it online, the NDEs, and people talk about a white light and hearing, this, and certain things, people are like, oh, it's God, it's this. A lot of people believe it's the natural release of DMT. So for me, what happened, I was pronounced dead on the scene. I was basically half in, half out of the car, but basically I had a huge cut on my neck close to the jugular vein, and I had almost bled out. I left my body that day and started floating above the crash scene. And I'm looking down in the car, and I can feel the treetops, and I'm looking as if I'm touching them, but I have no hand. And I can feel them. I'm like, that's really strange. And I'm looking down, and I just felt this overwhelming love and peace. And there was light, but it wasn't like a tunnel that I was going towards. It was just, I was the light. Everything was the light. I felt connected to everything. I felt like I was the wind, I was the treetops, and I felt like I could keep going, and I wanted to keep flying up wherever it may go. And the voice of my dead grandfather came to me, and he said, Chris, he's like, I love you. It's not your time. You need to go back. You need to go back. And I remember pleading with him, like, no.
I'm done with this.
No, I'm good. I see what's down there. It's like, that's about a year of rehab down there. I'm like, I'm good on that. So convinced me. And it's like, I remember almost having the choice of, like, I had him by the hand, even though I didn't have hands. It was like our energy was connected. And in that moment, I realized that everything's connected. You know what I mean? And this is people that have near-death experiences or Kundalini awakening or meditation. Like, there's so many different paths to this. But when you realize that everything's connected, it was just like that moment of, oh my God. And I was like, thank you so much. And then I went back down into my body. And when I went back down into my body, I'm surrounded by firefighters and these people, and my body's completely broken, and the pain is unbelievable. Literally bones sticking out of the skin, smashed. They had to drag me out of the car. I went in, so I had that awakening and that crazy experience, but then it was followed by literally a year of surgeries, pain, trauma. They had to completely reconstruct my lower body with titanium plates, screws, rods. So that was very painful, but it was like, I remember going into those first couple surgeries. For the first 2 weeks that I was in the hospital, I was basically in a drug-induced coma. Do you know what I mean? So I was pumped full of
yes, of course. Yep. I know what you're talking about.
I was, and I didn't know what was going on. I was so confused. And like I said, that rehab, like, it was always my dream to be a professional fighter. I'd always been really into jiu-jitsu and wrestling and kickboxing. And I had actually trained for people that are in the know with jiu-jitsu. I trained seminars with Royce Gracie, which was the original UFC champion. So I was in on the scene way back. And after the car accident, I was done. That dream had basically been ripped away because it took me a year to learn how to walk again. I went through surgeries. I managed to rehab myself. And again, just to touch on the point, it was all about the physical. There was at no point did anybody come and say, hey, there was a woman that was involved, she passed away. How do you feel about that? I would come to learn more about survivor's guilt and carrying the guilt and the shame of being in an accident that was my fault that caused another human to die. Like, they didn't touch on any of that. It was all like, oh, we need to get you walking again and we'll get you all set up. So that was the main focus.
Yep.
I remember recovering from all that. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go back. I'm going to switch my university. And I'm going to go and study at a different university in the Valley. I'm going to switch what I'm studying. I'm sort of questioning everything at this point, because I just had this crazy spiritual awakening, then followed by all the trauma and surgery. So I'm confused as fuck. Like, I don't know whether I'm coming or going or what I'm doing. So instead of focusing on any of the mental aspects, I just hopped back in for another year of university. And I guess it was somebody telling me that I was on the wrong path, because 2 weeks into my third year of university, I was bicycling and I had a backpack with all my books and my computer. And back in those days, computers were big. They were weight on my backpack.
Yeah.
A lot of holes out in front of me, cuts out in front of me, and I hit this car. All kinds of road rash and skin damage. But I remember it wasn't so bad. I remember just getting up, and the first thing was like, can't believe this has happened. So I grabbed my bicycle and it smashed. So I carry it back to my apartment, and I'm having massive chest pains. So I don't know what's going on. I go to the hospital. They scrub out my road rash. They take a chest x-ray and they send me on my way. So that weekend, I got my bike fixed and I biked home. It was about 100, I remember, because it was about a 100-kilometer bike ride, 120-kilometer bike ride back to the town that I was living in when I wasn't at university. And I remember doing it because it was the 1 year anniversary of my car accident. So I'm like biking, and I had a special moment where I laid down, I biked past the crash scene, and I'm like healthy now and strong. And I stopped and I kind of gave, gratitude and thanks. I get home to see my girlfriend at the time, and we pour a glass of wine, and I sit down, like it's going to be a good weekend. Phone rings, and she just kind of looks and hands me the phone. I'm like, is this Chris Allen? I'm like, yes. They're like, are you sitting down? And I'm like, yes. And they're like, we had just received the results from your chest x-ray. You have torn 2 layers of your aorta a year before, and now you have what's referred to as a pseudoaneurysm, and your heart's basically ready to explode. You need emergency heart surgery. So I was like, at that point, I finished the bottle of wine, and I'm like, I was like, fuck. So I go, and again, it was like, there's something wrong with me. Do you know what I mean? There's always something wrong with me. There's always some trauma. So I go and go through heart surgery. Yeah, so basically they did an open heart surgery, but instead of cutting in the front and breaking the sternum, I had a very good surgeon who went in through the back.
Yeah.
So they'd have to collapse the lung, open the ribs. They'd cut a chunk of my aorta and pull it together and stitch it up. The surgery went smooth. I think it was like an 8-hour surgery, but they managed to fix me. Very painful recovery. But again, I remember it was all about the physical, and I recovered. And after the heart surgery, I've read a few articles about this, but I think there's somewhere, between a 50 to 60% chance of a heart patient suffering a massive depression and trying to commit suicide if their heart has actually been touched. Do you know what I mean? So if your heart is physically stopped and touched, it's weird that it's not meant to be, so it causes a depression. So,
That's so fascinating, because there's so much work being done on the power of the heart, and how, obviously we know it beats for us, and there's so much ancient wisdom that says follow your heart, and the heart's the source of wisdom. But really, from a scientific standpoint, I was reading up on Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, and I practice his breath work, and I really find him fascinating. He speaks to me in a way that I can dissect and understand what deep healing is all about. And he had a quote that he put out in one of his books and posted on one of his social channels just the other day. And it said, "We've been led to believe that the brain reigns over our biology. While this is partly true, the heart is an autorhythmic organ, which means the heartbeat is self-initiated from within the heart, not from the brain." Now that is fucking fascinating. Which means the heart is a powerhouse on its own, and it generates it has its own consciousness, so to say. It has its own brain. Well, if there is a human being that comes in and tampers with it, I can only imagine that it leaves an emotional scar. Having overcome physical and emotional trauma time and again, would you say there's anything good that comes out of this?
I have a strong belief that I think everybody should go through a deeply traumatic event in their life to help them realize, about gratitude.
Yes,
This bullshit that we worry about that doesn't matter.
Yes,
It's like,
I agree.
it gets me so upset when I hear people complaining about certain shit, and it's like I catch myself doing it all the time because, yes, you have an awakening, but an awakening, just because you have it doesn't mean you stay awake. You can go back to sleep at any time you want. You can get drunk. You can cross addict with relationships. You can cross with whatever you want to distract yourself from it. So just because you have an awakening doesn't mean like, oh, I reached the finish line. Now I'm all good. It's like, no, actually now it's daily work, and it's brutal. It sometimes can be frustrating because you don't feel like you're on the right path. You feel like you're doing things wrong, and then obviously other people come in, and if you're not careful with listening, they can just steer you way off the path that you should be on.
Ooh, this is a nice topic to segue into. So, what would you say your purpose is, or the dream that you wanted to follow? What is it that you wanted to do after coming out of an experience like this? I'm sure you felt like, fuck it, I want to do something I love.
I had 3-year attempt at studying psychology and nutrition and all these things. So I'm like, you know what? Like, I'm not going back to university. I'm a musician. I've been playing guitar and writing songs since I've been a kid. So I'm going to go and follow my dream of being a musician. I'm going to go. At the time, I was living on the east coast of Canada in Nova Scotia. And then I decided, you know what? It's always been a dream of mine to be a musician. So I'm going to move to the west coast of Vancouver, BC. I enrolled in a year-long course of recorded music production, learning how to work in a studio and how to mic everything and getting all the right levels. So it was like, that was always my passion. Something that for me was huge in the rehab process. Music for me is like, music can heal for sure. It's like, people always talk about the placebo effect of different things, but when you have good music, it can really heal your spirit and can make you want to do better. It can. For me, it's a tool. I use it when I work out. I mean, it taps into something. If I have aggressive music, it can make me push harder. If I have gentle music, it can help me relax. So it's like, I'd always loved music. So I basically went to the West Coast when I was 21 years old and started doing this music production. However, because of the heart surgery, I had no idea what was coming. It hit me about a couple months into my studies, massive depression from the heart surgery, which led me down the road of getting drunk every day, getting high, and met some really unsavory characters in Vancouver, Canada. I ended up getting into some really bad things to try to deal with my depression. And I didn't know how. And also as a young man who was, a tough guy and you don't talk about your feelings, you stuff everything down.
Yep.
Didn't really have anybody to talk to. So I just basically self-medicated through the depression, which after about a year and a half lifted. I got involved in working in the film industry for a bit, doing stunts and acting, stunts of all things. With my broken body, I had rehab because I was young and strong, but now I'm still pushing the limits. Very toxic environment. I don't know if you're familiar with the film industry, but it's people up, spits them out. The hours are long. I think, the divorce rate and addiction rate with the people that work in film is pretty fucking high. There's a lot of miserable people. So I had a chance to work in front of the camera and behind the camera and did some things. During that time, one of my other passions is basically just coaching people with physical fitness, whether it be martial arts or just, rehabbing people, because I have a very unique outlook on how to rebuild the human body. Because during my rehabs, like literally after my car accident, I went in, I was a very high level athlete, martial arts. And after the car accident, my new training regimen was taking a little water bottle and only filling it half full and curling it with the only arm that wasn't in a cast or have metal sticking out of it. So I have a very unique way of training people because of that experience. And I see people that are really overweight. You have to approach people differently. Every different personality has a way that will respond. And I've had a knack or a gift of dealing with people and helping them recover from whatever they're going through or getting in shape. So I just started doing that. I ended up running and managing a mixed martial arts gym in the Lower East Side of Vancouver, Canada. Now, Lower East Side, there was a book written about it by Dr. Gabor Mate. Check out Dr. Gabor Mate in the Realm of the Hungry Ghost. In the Realm of the Hungry Ghost is a book written about the Lower East Side in Vancouver, Canada, because there is an epidemic of meth, cocaine, and crack addiction. The neighborhood is filled with gangsters, prostitutes, lost souls, a lot of natives, like now that we're seeing, this whole Black Lives Matter movement. We also forget about the Native Americans. They got fucked over pretty hard too. Like, let's not leave them out of the conversation, because those people have been, pushed off onto reservations and
100%
and forgotten. So in the neighborhood that I worked in, I managed this mixed martial arts gym, but also did security to try to, keep the neighborhood safe, which was a pretty tall job. I mean, you're basically a grief mop. You're not really fixing anything. You're just moving grief around from place to place because there's so much of it. So I worked in that neighborhood and did that for quite a few years until eventually I had developed a drug addiction to Oxycontin. So I would take a lot of Oxycontin, a lot of Percocets. If I couldn't get that, it would be cocaine, it would be booze. And I ran as a functioning, drug addict and alcoholic for probably about 2 years until one day there was an incident, and I got really screwed up, and I got shipped off to rehab for 3 months. So I spent 3 months in a rehab facility. It was my first time in a sort of drug and alcohol rehab facility. All my rehabs have been physical, and now I'm in a facility where it's like, okay, now I'm going to deal with the mind. You know, now after all these years, I'm going to start. And I'll be honest, like, it was based on the 12-step program, and I think that if 12 steps works for you, you know, I follow Russell Brand. I know he's a 12-stepper, and you know, there's a lot of people that it works really well for. But for me, there was like a neon sign. It just said cult. It's like, I just felt like the 12-step program was a cult. It's like, you know, I see all these people who are in recovery, smoking a pack of cigarettes, drinking coffee, and eating sugar as much as they can, and they're in recovery, and they're the most unhealthy and miserable people I knew. And I'm like, well, this doesn't look like recovery. I remember in rehab, it took me the first 2 months to get past step number 1, which is admitting we're weak and powerless. I'm a stubborn bastard.
I'm at the door.
No way. No way. Until eventually I just wanted to get out. Okay, I'm weak and powerless. It's like, you know, I give my
like, move on with it.
Let's get to the 12 steps and get out of here. So it's like, I don't want to make it sound like I didn't take something away from it, but I just noticed that the therapists were all screwed up too. Like, I had doctors and psychologists and psychiatrists, and they're all miserable. I mean, some of them are overweight, and it's like, you know, as a coach, I always like one body being healthy, and those things the same as when I look for coaches. So as a mental coach, I'm like, you're miserable. I don't, like, what are you going to coach me on? Like, you've read all the DSM, you've studied, and you've gone through your book smarts, but you don't have any real life experience with any of this. So I didn't relate to my, you know, I found more healing in talking to other recovering addicts, and that's what the 12-step program offers for people, is community. And it's something that I've carried forward. I do think community is important. You need to have people that you can reach out and talk to. You need to have people that you can share what's really going on. You know, and people that'll check you. You know, my best friends are like, Chris, you're full of shit. You know, like, that's not it. And it's like, okay, yeah, you're right. First I get pissed, and I'm like, thank you. So those are your friends, the ones that talk shit to your face.
Yes, the honest truth. It's the brutal truth. Those are the best ones.
Brutal truth. So yeah, that was an interesting experience going through rehab, and I managed to stay sober for a full year. Unfortunately, I was still managing the gym. I was still hanging out with, you know, different people that were into like gang shit, and people that, like, the neighborhood was bad. So for 1 year, I was almost like the shining little light in this dark hole, you know, where there was no hope around for anybody. And eventually it just tore me down. It was like, I ended up, I had something really bad happen. I had to leave. I was like, I've done rehab. I've tried this. I have to leave the situation I'm in. I'm around bad people. I'm not doing the things that I don't feel like I'm not in alignment anymore. I'm trying to be sober. I'm trying to better myself. And I'm with all these other people who are trying to pull me down. So I relocated back to Nova Scotia on the East Coast. And I probably took about a year and a half. You know, that's when I really got heavy into yoga. I stopped, you know, I had problems, some injuries, you know, obviously all the hardware I have in my body. I need to be careful of how hard I push myself now and would prevent injury. So I really found yoga. I'd always done yoga, but I had never, like, I'd always sort of studied it on my own and done my own, like, had a few teachers, but preferred to just do it on my own. I didn't like the class aspect of always going. I said, you know what, I'm going to join a class. And I started doing yoga, and I started doing it once, twice every day, and studying a lot. And it helped me through a period. It helped me stay sober, you know, like, so I'd gone from, you know, being involved in a situation that was really shitty for me into a position that was good. And after about a year and a half, I decided I'm going to move to Thailand. And I'm going to move to Thailand, and I'm going to start running yoga and fitness retreats. And like I said, because of all the experiences that I had, it just gave me this special capability of connecting with people. Like, if somebody was going through a rough time, like, you feeling okay? And they can be like, you know, people are so scared to talk about being depressed. It was like the worst word ever. Like, as soon as you say anything, for me, I'm like, I've been, you know, smashed and burnt and crashed all over the place. I don't care. Like, I don't care what people think of me anymore. I'm like, this is what it is. Yeah, you're damn right I went through depression. So then people felt like, hey, you know, this guy really gets it. You know, he really understands. It's not like, you know, I always tell this funny story as, you know, like, some doctors and psychologists, it's the same as everything else. There's some good ones and there's some bad ones. You know, when I was going through the really tough time and recovering from what happened in Vancouver, I was doing yoga and I was also seeing a therapist. Well, the first therapist that I had already gone and seen him 3 times. And it was on the 4th visit where I'm sitting in front of him and he's not even making eye contact with me. And he's like, and he said, "So Kevin," he's like, "how are the wife and kids?" I'm like, "Who the fuck is Kevin?" And it's like,
no way.
So I was like, you know what I mean? These are the stories of trying to recover and reach out for help. It's like, here's some dude who doesn't even want his job. He's supposed to be helping people, and he has he can't even remember my name. You know what I mean? So it's like I did have good doctors along the way, but for me, there's such a need for good mental health workers. We're lacking in that, you know, people that actually listen and people that, not just people that study the books, but people that understand. It's like, you know, there's that term bedside manner with doctors, you know, how a doctor will come in with a clipboard and patient 379 is displaying, and it's like, they're talking about you like you're not even there. And it's like, fuck, I'm like, right here. How about like, how are you today? Even just 30 seconds of how are you doing? How do you feel? Not just, you know, a scale of 1 to 10. And it's all just like this. It's dehumanizing.
Yes. Like you're a statistic. That's it.
100%. Yeah. So that's like, you know, something that I always talk with about people. You know, you need to have people that you trust and want to talk to, because don't just talk to anybody, because it can almost be like secondary wound. If you deal with somebody that doesn't understand, you know, you'll get advice like suck it up and just push through and all this bullshit. It's like, that's not actually a strategy. You know, you got to honor where you're at and look at those things first before you just suck it up and push through. Like, yeah, that works as a fighter, but as a human who's trying to live, that's a whole different thing, you know?
It's like this whole concept of working through the emotion needs to be communicated more. It's like, feel it. If you're angry, be angry. If you're feeling sadness, feel sadness. Get it out of your system. Especially with every industrial revolution, right? We've become like the productivity intense economy across the globe, which is all about
cogs in a machine.
Yeah,
there's cogs in a machine, a number, and
that's it.
You know, that's what it is.
I remember when I went to see a psychiatrist. He didn't even talk to me, by the way. He didn't know what my story was. He didn't ask about anything. He's like, "You have depression. You're just gonna need some Prozac." Like, I was like, "Really?" Like, you know, and you know, then if you don't have some way of sifting to always second guess what you've been told, you would just get sucked into that, and then you'd be dependent on the drug.
There's a quote, I forget who said it, but it's very powerful, and I'm sure that it'll resonate with a lot of people. But those treated with Western medicine need to recover twice, once from the ailment and once from the medication. I went on antidepressants when I was in Vancouver and I was struggling with drug addiction, and I went and I was same as you. You know, I went and I just said, "Oh, you know, I'm having really bad thoughts. You know, it's like I feel like life is meaningless now, and I've had so much suffering, and you know, this and that, and I really don't know. I'm starting to get scared. Like, I just don't feel like I don't have a purpose. I don't have a meaning. I don't have direction. I don't have any help." And the first thing the doctor did, like, just like you said, wrote up a script and he's like, "Here you go." And he wrote me a script for Wellbutrin, which, you know, when I actually look back on it, Wellbutrin is like a drug that they use for some reason to help people stop smoking and all these different things. And it's loaded full of stimulants. So now I'm fucking jacked and having panic attacks all day. It's like what I got out of antidepressants for the first month I was on, I noticed something good that happened when I was on antidepressants. I went about a month and it would give me a moment before I would have an emotional outburst or I would react. It would give me that split second that I needed to be like, "No, don't say anything. Just, you know, get it under control and think about what you're doing here." And it would give me that moment. But after the month of that went by, I went into the second and third month where I was just flat. I was never happy. I was never sad. I was just kind of robotic. It was just the baseline. Sex drive's down. Energy levels are down. Now I feel even more depressed because now it's the things that you should be enjoying in life I don't care for anymore. I don't feel like I have my personality, my sense of humor, my energy.
It's the numbness. You get numb. Yeah.
It's horrible. So my run with antidepressants pretty much finished after a year loading my shotgun and sitting in the bathtub, ready to blow my brains out. And I remember in that moment, that was another awakening. Like, what the fuck are you doing? You've just survived all this shit, and you've come through, and you've struggled so hard to survive. Like, I literally had to fight every day to just be alive, and now I'm going to kill myself. I'm like, this isn't me. Like, who is this? I remember that day I took the rest of the bottle, which I had, they'd already had me on like 450 milligrams. I put it all in the trash compressor, not the way you're supposed to come off of it, because for the next month and a half to 2 months, I got this thing called brain zaps, where it's like you feel this electricity in your head. And it's something that happens with people that go on antidepressants. Like, psychiatrists and psychologists, like, this is going to sound pretty blunt, but a lot of them don't have a fucking clue what they're doing. And we don't know what these medications do. And the problem in the US right now, they're talking about gun control. What about pharmaceutical control?
The mental health care workers are going to be the most important. They have always been, but the problem is that there was a gap between science and the concept of spirituality. I don't like to use that word because people kind of get a little bit offbeat about it, but like the deep inner meaning of your consciousness, right? What is your consciousness, and what is going on within, and how can you tap into this intelligence that really is all around you? Like those two are like, they're hand in hand. Like the science and consciousness and everything is fused.
It's like what Carl Edward Sagan said, right? The famous American astronomer. I'm sure many people who are listening to this have heard of him. He's written the book Cosmos and the Pale Blue Dot. And he put it beautifully in his quote about science and spirituality. He said, the very act of understanding is a celebration of joining, merging, even if for a very modest scale, with the magnificence of the cosmos. Science is therefore not only compatible with spirituality, it is a profound source of spirituality. I'm going to read out how the Oxford Dictionary defines spirituality. It's the quality of being concerned with the human spirit or soul as opposed to material or physical things, to look for something beyond what we can see in the reality that surrounds us and is us. I think the communication element of doctor to patient has been greatly developed in certain countries. I do, however, feel that there's so much work that needs to be done in regard to alternative medicine and weaving that into mainstream medicine, along with the way big pharma works. That's a whole other conversation, but being able to weave in a more comprehensive approach to listening to someone who's coming to you with a physical ailment, a disease, and asking them important questions like, what does your day look like on a regular basis? What are you going through at work, at home? Over a series of sessions, which is almost merging therapy into the standard healthcare practice. And then also looking at nutrition at a deeper level. And that looks at, there's different angles to it. I mean, are we eating local? Are the things that we're picking off the shelf as useful to our bodies as we think they are? Are we even thinking about this? I follow Dr. Mark Heyman, and it's fascinating how much of an effect food can have on our well-being from a mental well-being perspective and a physical well-being perspective. I mean, there are some great doctors who I know of who always ask about stress and ask about, how you're feeling. There's tons of research out there that says when you have higher levels of cortisol, which is the stress hormone in your blood, your system is in imbalance. And so illness is almost inevitable if it's chronic stress. And obviously you have the default syndrome where people are quick to diagnose, even if you're not a healthcare worker. You just want to help your loved ones, so you immediately turn to pharmaceuticals. What's your take on that, especially when it comes to children?
Take a child, put them in a classroom, give him a can of Coca-Cola and some gummy bears, and then tell him to sit down and shut up for 8 hours? Not going to happen. Now he's hyperactive. Oh, he has ADD. Give him some Ritalin. No, he's had too much sugar and he needs to go outside and play is what he needs. He doesn't need fucking medication. And it makes me so upset because the pills that are being given to people do not heal people. Like, I've seen some examples. You know, I have some people that are very close to me that suffer with bipolar or, you know, manic depression. And again, you know, if you follow the DSM, you can open the DSM and basically diagnose yourself with anything. You know what I mean? You can self-diagnose. You can, but I know some people who are legitimately bipolar. I know what they're like with lithium, and I know what they're like without lithium. And I think in some cases, and same with schizophrenia, because those are the things that people say, you know, if you're schizophrenic or bipolar, you should not work with plant medicines. Well, you can, it's not always that cut and dry. Yes, I agree, but if you've done work and you're in a healthy place, I think you can still work with it, but you can't be on medications. So again, you know, like another example, I think big pharma is obviously, I mean, some pharmaceuticals, like I had a stomach surgery at one point, and I was going to have to go back in because I got an infection, and I was given the option, do you want to take medication or do you want to have another surgery? Thank God for that medication because I didn't have to have another surgery. But they need to be, there needs to be a tighter sort of regulation on how they're done, not incentives for doctors to give more, because that's how it works. The doctors get kickbacks the more they prescribe. And I actually had a medical doctor that came on one of our retreats, and she's doing something amazing. It's like her and I would talk for hours about, you know, like mental health and how to deal with sickness. And she never prescribes medicine. It's always the first thing she says, do you exercise? Do you do yoga? Do you do breath work?
Yeah, that is what's needed. Yes, a new checklist, checklist.
I'll never forget. It's like I saw something on MTV one time. It was Britney Spears telling the public, you know, we should just trust our presidents. It's like, fuck that. Trust ourselves and take the power in our own hands. Don't wait for the system to help us, because the system is not going to help us. You know, it's like in some ways it will, but it's like if we're looking to the system that created all this sickness to heal us, then we're looking in the wrong place. We really are. It's like, it's all my hospital visits. It's like something that I always tell people when I'm training them, whether it be to help them, you know, get back in shape. It's like, you can't keep looking to the doctors to just give you the cure. You have to search for it yourself and find your own path. You know, oh, what do I do, doctor? And it's like, well, the doctor might just give you pills and not tell you to exercise and do the things that are important and have community and do. You need to go and find that on your own. I mean, so after I had sort of gotten over the heavy addiction to drugs and pharmaceuticals that I dealt with, I moved to Thailand. I lived in Thailand for about 5 years. I was in Thailand and I was managing. I first went to do yoga and fitness retreats. And I was there doing that for probably about 1.5 years. And then another opportunity sort of popped up for me where there was a detox center that needed a new manager. They had lost their management. There had been falling out. So I was brought in and basically just started managing their programs in Thailand. So I did that at that center for about 3.5 years, that's where I learned a lot about sort of what brought me to Peru, because the whole theory, we operated on Dr. Bernard Jensen's theory of bowel cleansing and tissue maintenance through what was referred to as hydrocolon therapy or kalimas or colonics. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's a flushing of the bowel. So they basically, so you use it. It's like but we also mix that with daily fasting. So people would come and go on fasting programs, because that's something that to this day that I believe, it's like if you study nature, when animals get sick, fasting for 3 days is a great way to boost your immune system.
Oh, yes.
You know,
oh, yes.
So I worked with people in that capacity for almost 4 years, where they would come in, and I'm dealing with people from all over the world. I mean, we had a lot from the UK, we had a lot from Dubai, Abu Dhabi, China. Some of the sickest people that I've met have come from China.
Oh, wow.
Business people like that have not seen the light. You know, they're pasty white. They've not been out in the sun. And even if they were, there would be smog they would be breathing. You know, like a lot of people from Beijing. So, and there are people from Australia. So what was really cool is that I got to meet all these people and all these corporate types and people that were really driven and so successful, but their health was in shambles. They literally would crash land. So again, what I said, they're just this, they're just their head. You know, they're not connected to their body or their heart. They're just their head. So it's like they come and crash land and they want to get in shape. So we put them, some of them would come and stay for a week. Some would stay for 2 weeks. Some people would go on juice fast or raw food diet, or they would do complete fasting with 2 kalimas a day. And what I started to notice is that people would come, and after about a week or 2 weeks, they would be starting to look like a new person and they're really healthy. But obviously, they're not at work. They're not in their relationship. They're not in the environment that caused the sickness. So they come, they focus only on the physical. I got to lose, 6 kilos in this amount of time. And I see them and they come and then they go and they look healthy and they're great. 6 months later, they come back. They're more overweight and more depressed than they were before they came the first time. And I started seeing this trend of how people were just using this, like this 1 week retreat.
Escapism.
Yeah, and that's all it is. They're basically using it as an addiction. Like, I'm going to go take care of my health for a week or two, and I'm going to go back to destroying myself with drinking 6 scotches every night and working like all day and all night and not spending time with my family, not going outside, not doing this. So my biggest, it'd be frustrating because I'd work with people and they'd get healthy, but then they'd go back. And I just found that, you're not going to make any lasting changes. It was the same as me, the same pattern that I could go through all this work and rehab and work on myself, but I went back to the same environment. So it was only a matter of time. And I can say from my experience and seeing, it doesn't matter how strong you are. It's just a matter of time. You need to remove yourself from the situations or make the changes that can help you cope with it a little bit better. So what I started seeing was all these workaholics and A-type personalities that are driven, and I want to go get this, and I'm doing this, and they're more and more overweight. A lot of them, it stemmed from they wanted to get in shape, they wanted to do yoga, they wanted to do this, but there was something deeper. There was something below the physical that emotionally, I don't know if they weren't hugged enough as a child, or they had a horrible relationship, but there's something deeper than just the stress, that like there's a root cause. And trying to get to that root cause with some people is virtually impossible. They don't want to talk about it because you take this person who runs several businesses, who's in charge and in command, and like their ego's gotten to the point they know everything. You know what I mean? Like, what are you even going to tell me? It's like, well, you're miserable, so you obviously don't know everything, because happiness is a big part of life that we should all be, able to enjoy, which these people didn't. So I worked there, and I noticed all these patterns of these people that, they could get their health in check as long as they weren't in their situation, and then they would go back. And I could never really quite, I could get through to some people and it would help them. And some people I had were success stories. They kept the weight off and they kept training and they made real changes. Most of them left the corporate squeeze job that they were in that was soul crushing. That's a big thing that I work with. So who I worked for a group of investors that had this place. And what happened at the retreat center is I took it from being, I think there were maybe 6 guests a week, to when I left, there were almost 30 new guests every week. We were doing different programs with meditation, yoga, fitness, but then the corporate came in. The place was taken over by a group of investors that started to do things like check, what are our costs? So now when I put somebody on a juice fast, they're putting in half the amount of vegetables in the juice. For me, it's like, you want to piss me off, water down my juice.
Don't mess with my juice.
Don't touch my juice. So we had a disagreement, and I left. I spent the next year, I had traveled. I had worked as a coach down in the Maldives. I bounced between Maldives and Abu Dhabi. I had spent some time working. I got another job offer to go work in Thailand. When I went back to Koh Samui, things didn't work out. So it was my dream to have my own center that sort of I would oversee and I would call the shots. I'm in the kitchen, making sure all the juice is going in where it's supposed to go. Things fell apart, and it was just like, I just reached a point where, okay, it's not going to happen. So I went back to Canada to sort of relocate and just think, what am I going to do? I mean, at the end of all the stuff in Thailand, I again had something happen where basically something ruptured in my pancreas at the end of the Thai run, and I was rushed back to Canada. I arrived back in Canada, was scanned, and I was told that I had pancreatic cancer. That was probably due to all the years of drug addiction and alcoholism, the damage that I had done to my body. So the doctor basically told me you probably have about 4 months left to live. So that's how I arrived back in Canada. Basically, what had happened is something had ruptured in my pancreas. They had done a scan, said I had pancreatic cancer. After a few more tests, they saw that it was just a pseudocyst, so something that had ruptured. I had to have massive stomach surgery where they cut me open. They removed a piece of the pancreas, my gallbladder, a section of my intestine. So that laid me up for quite some time. And again, like, what am I doing? So it was like, there's something wrong with me. And there's all those patterns that keep coming up. I managed to rehab, and it had always been a dream of mine to come to Peru and work with shamans. I'd always, I remember as a kid, my grandmother got me a subscription to the World Wildlife Foundation. And I would always see the magazines, and I would be going through them. And I'm like, where are these people from? See all the feathers and then like seeing them living in the jungle. I'm like, well, I want to go see how these people live.
I've always been fascinated by them as well.
It's amazing. So like I said, I had the business deal in Thailand. My dream of creating my own center kind of crumbled away again because it all came down to money. And, it's like, okay, well, I want to offer a great experience. And it's like, I don't mind charging a little bit more. And it's like, and like you said, you don't like to use the word spirituality. And I don't either, because I feel now that spirituality has almost done the same thing as the word God.
Exactly. So, it's really sad. I'm sad about that, because if I want to use that label and I'm comfortable with it, I should be allowed to. And if you don't, you should be allowed to do that too, but no judgment.
And I get it too. The reason I'm scared of the word spirituality is because I have traveled in sort of the yoga community circles, the meditation circles throughout Thailand, and I have noticed that, again, it's very culty. If you don't find a good school, I just find, like, with spirituality, there's the what is the term? Spiritual bypassing. So, like, people that they just regurgitate terms that they've heard. You know what I mean? So it's like, who would you be if only you could get out of your own way and be the change? And it's just like, these people they don't understand the wisdom. They're just regurgitating it. So for me, it's kind of like, well, are you the change? It's like,
tell me something new.
It's like, like I see the male yoga teacher who's banging half the class, and he's like, what I mean? There's all these dirty things going on. It's like, be the change and embrace the light. And it's like all this like love and light. It's like, I always take that with a grain of salt, because some people do embody it, but I just feel like it's become mixed spirituality. It's another thing that's been taken over. And now there's these people that do what's called spiritual bypassing, where they feel like they've awakened and they're enlightened, and now they're going to tell everybody else how to do it, but they're going to stop working on themselves. You know what I mean? So that's the part that scares me. And with the word, like, again, like, I remember going through the 12-step program. Everything was God this and God that. And it's like, my experience with God was, I would see, like, I had a lot of friends that, were abused by priests, and it's like, well, that doesn't sound like God to me either. So it's like, there's just starts to become all these different thoughts and feelings around certain words. So for me, like, I've come to embrace God, but still with spirituality, I'm like, because people say, oh, he runs a spiritual retreat. And it's like, yes and no. It's like, I've created a space where you can believe in whatever you want, and you can come, and nobody's going to tell you that you're wrong and that this is like, I've been to centers down here in Peru where literally, like, I see the person that's managing the center and they're miserable in their own life, and all they're doing is preaching to everybody else what to do with theirs, but they're not working on themselves. And it's like, at our retreat, there's no guru. It's like, there's no person that sits on a chair and everybody bows to, and, this is the shaman, kiss his feet and, whatever he wants. It's like, no. We're all humans. This is, we're in the age now where I believe in some traditions, but I think some traditions need to step into the present. They need to let go of the things that are holding them back. So where you said science and spirituality need to come together now. It's like,
it's the time.
Yes, it is time. It's like, it's time for people to stop worrying about what everybody else is doing and focus on themselves, better themselves. And once you've worked on yourself enough, try to strengthen your community and lead by example. And if we do that, we create these pockets. And that's what I've tried to do down here in Peru, is create this pocket that's like, You can be a yogi, you can be a Buddhist, you can be, a Muslim, you can be black, you can be white, you can be whatever you are. It's like even with our team, like, Kunti's a Mexican woman. Pepe, our shaman, is a Shipibo shaman. I'm Canadian. It's like, we have men, we have women, we have the people that we bring together. It's like, to me, that's what psychedelics have shown me, is that we're all connected. So I try to create an environment that reflects that. And at no point is anybody going to tell you you're on the wrong path. I'm there to guide people through the experience, but you're there to have your own experience. So your experience is going to be completely different than the guy from Silicon Valley. Maybe there'll be, similarities, but maybe because he's a man, he has different traumas. You're a woman, you have different issues that you want to deal with. So basically, we just wanted to create a space that's not heavy on the spiritualism, the woo-woo, everybody hold their crystals now and we're all going to do this and everybody chant this way. If you like crystals and you're into crystal healing, good. Me so much, not really. And I have other dudes that I work with that if you get them to hold a crystal and tell them to pray, they're just going to look at you like you're crazy. And I'm not going to judge either side of it. Whatever works for you. Basically, that's, that had been my dream. So what brought me down here to Peru was, I wanted to set the center up in Thailand, and I did have for a while a nice setup, but I was lacking the plant medicine. I saw all these sick people that, there's a joke that I always like, because I have a lot of Irish and Russian friends through martial arts, and they say the Russians and the Irish are impervious to any type of therapy. I'm like, yes, except for psychedelics. Like, you can be the toughest guy in the world. It's like, give me a night off, like all these different things. So the next morning, after you've done all this together, you're much more likely to open up.
So tell me a little bit about what got you into plant medicine. When did you think of exploring it, and what is your belief system around it?
Well, I had always, where I grew up, I had started experimenting with psilocybin, so magic mushrooms, when I was just young. But when I had experimented with those, it was more in like a party scene. You know what I mean? So it was like out at a party playing some music, drinking some beers, and you eat a handful of mushrooms. So my first couple experiences with psychedelics were actually with psilocybin, magic mushrooms. And at first, I wasn't using it so much as a therapy, but I was using it just to sort of like to party and have fun. And I had one really heavy night where I took too much and ended up alone and went through a really heavy process. And I was like, I was still too young, and I don't suggest psychedelics for, I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, and it's like I look back on them and it's like I can't take it back, and I don't regret it. It happened how it would have, but I would think that you'd want to have your brain fully formed before you start dabbling with psychedelics, and you'd want to do other work. So for me, it's like, there's all this like, are you familiar with MAPS?
Mm-hmm.
It just featured, Tim Ferriss is a huge supporter of them. And he just had the creator of MAPS on his podcast, which is really fascinating. And they're talking about that. So,
can you touch on that a little bit?
Well, it's an organization that's run by this doctor. I can't remember his name at this point, but he firmly believes in the benefits of psychedelics, assisting people with PTSD, depression, any form of mental illness. I mean, he's a legitimate doctor, and he's backed by Tim Ferriss. And if any of your listeners know who Tim Ferriss is, like, this is a legitimate businessman, entrepreneur who's, worth hundreds of millions of dollars now. He's made himself, self-made. So these are the people that are getting behind. Tim Ferriss talks openly about his struggles with PTSD. He didn't touch on that podcast, but he at one point in his life was going to commit suicide. He speaks openly about it, and psychedelics helped him with this. So MAPS, what they're doing is they're trying to demonstrate and show the benefits of psychedelics and how they can be used. And not just psychedelics, but also marijuana, because it's like, for me, as somebody that works with plant medicines, it's amazing how many people hate on marijuana. I'm like, how can you hate on such a beautiful plant? Like, after my car accident, I spent a month completely sedated with morphine and oxys and drooling on myself. I had a friend bring me an ounce of really good blueberry kush. I got off the medication. I'm in my wheelchair doing laps around the hospital, smoking a joint in a snowstorm, because it made me want to get up and go with it. The other pain, like, it took away my pain, but it also motivated. You know what I mean? Like, and on this other side of this, I have friends, they smoke pot, they eat Twinkies, and they play video games. I smoke pot, I go do an hour and a half of yoga. So it's like, is it your medicine? Maybe it's not. If you're going to be sitting in front of the TV for all day because you're high, probably not your medicine, because it's hurting you. But for me, I get, it helps me with chronic pain issues. Look at the benefits of CBD. Like, do you want CBD or do you want chemotherapy? Let's give the CBD a try first. Like, maybe let's give that a go.
And epilepsy as well. It's known to help with, yeah. So it's all about perspective, all about use or abuse. Are you using it or you're abusing it?
The government doesn't educate people in that because it's easier to get money with the big pharma and have them control everything. And it's like, again, it's like some doctors are good, some are bad. People say, we should just trust the doctor. It's like, what kind of doctor do you have? Do you have a doctor that's getting kickbacks from big pharma to keep you hooked on pills that you don't need?
But I believe there are some states right now that do prescribe CBD oil, like the state of California, I believe, does that.
Well, Canada finally now it's fully legal, like marijuana, like THC and CBD are fully legal in Canada, many states in the US. And that's what fascinates me, because down here in Peru, ayahuasca is legal. Huachuma, the local cactus that has mescaline, legal. Marijuana, illegal. I know people that are tell people. I mean, I've known people that have suffered with depression that are drinking every day. I'm like, hey, you know what? The alcohol is going to make you even more depressed.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like, I can't get off it. I'm like, well, then maybe smoke a few joints and see if you can get off it that way. And I don't advocate anything or push anything on anybody that they don't feel comfortable with. But maybe, that's a little extreme. I don't want to, smoke pot. It's like, maybe smoke pot before you go on antidepressants and see if it can help you through that phase and then get off that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, instead of just right away, like you said, like there's a pill for everything now. There's somebody that I have a lot of respect for that's doing a lot right now, Wim Hof.
Wim Hof is amazing. He was down at your retreat, right?
He was here with his family for 1 week. Wim doesn't need plant medicines. Wim
He's awesome. I do his breath work and I feel all tingly and happy when I'm done. I've got like a nice high and I'm like, yeah, this is good.
Yeah,
self-regulation.
High off your own breath.
Yeah, that's his thing. Yeah, you get high on your own supply. I love it.
Exactly. I spent a week with him and his family, and like I said, what really I learned about that week is when he arrived. I've always looked up to the man, so I was like, first I'm like, I'm not going to go fanboy or anything like that. He's like, him and I clicked instantly because all we talked about the whole week was mental health. I mean, there's a video. So for any of your listeners that want to check out something really cool, there's a Wim Hof. It's about an 8-minute video. It's Wim Hof word porn. There's a site called Word Porn. Mm-hmm. So there's a video called Wim Hof Word Porn. And in it, he talks about, he had 4 children with his first wife. His first wife was manic depressive, bipolar.
Yeah.
She jumped out of their 8-story window and committed suicide.
I heard his story.
Yeah, it's like in the video, it really hits home because it's like, here's a man who's hell-bent on helping people for the right reasons. People there's always going to be haters. I get haters all the time. Oh, you're making money off plant medicine. Plant medicine should be free. And Wim's making money off breath. It's like, we need to provide for our families. We need to provide for ourselves, but we're still offering something that's good.
It's such a valuable service. And people talk anyway. There's judgment either way. So you do what your heart says. This work is needed. People need to know how to use these tools that are available to them in nature and within themselves.
The thing that really struck me with, after hearing Wim, I had known Wim's story and why he was on this mission. But it's like, here's a man who raised 4 children on his own, and his wife had, left a huge hole in the family. And I was like, I remember talking to him, I said, that must have been so hard when your wife committed suicide. And he's like, it was almost for the family, like it was a relief because the lead up to that had been so fucking horrible. When you deal, like I have a family member who suffers with bipolar disorder, and it's been hell. It's been absolute hell because you never know when the mood swings are coming. You don't know how to do it. It's like how to deal with them. You don't know how to help them, and it's, you want to be close, but there's always walls up, and there's always like a drama, and there's always like, drama and trauma straight across the board all the time. And, it's very frustrating. So talking with him and spending the week with Wim, it's like I saw that the medicines that we use on the retreat, it's not just psychedelics, because psychedelics will show you a path, but you have to walk it. So do your breath work, do your yoga. And when I watched Wim, it's like he's always laughing. He's sharing his energy, and for me, it's like playing music. We played music the whole time. We laughed together. And it's like, to me, those are two of the
I
strongest
love
medicines.
it. I love
Laughter,
it.
laughter, and also,
Oh yes, music
so
and dance, like
music and
the
dance,
movement.
movement, whatever you want to do. You like kickboxing, good. You like ballroom dancing, good. You like yoga, go for that. Like Tai Chi, whatever. Like, I'm not going to hate on anybody that they're moving their body. It's like, maybe it's not my thing, but it's their thing. And that's the whole thing of like biodiversity and letting each other explore who we are, instead of like, this is the way you heal and this is the experience you need to have. The week with Wim was all about singing, movement, breath work, and then hot and cold therapies. Obviously we did some ice baths, we did some steam sauna. So with our retreats now, it's like, it's not just about the psychedelics, it's about also sharing stories. Like, I have learned so much over the last 10 years because I've been gifted with a job where I meet 10 to 20 new people every week. You know what I mean? And I get to hear their stories and hear their struggles and what part of the world they come from and different challenges they face. So it's like, we can learn from storytelling. Then when we laugh together, music, movement, breath work, hot and cold therapy, spending time in nature, and then using the psychedelics. Like, there's more than just one thing. I mean, I had a retreat last year, or was it last year? Yeah, it would have been in the fall of last year, where it was pretty much all a men's retreat. Kunti was there serving toad medicine. We worked with the toad medicines and we worked with Wachuma. We didn't have ayahuasca, and we spent the week doing physical fitness, climbing mountains. So it's like, it doesn't all need to be about the ayahuasca. There's many different medicines. And I think one of the most important medicines, especially down here in the Andes Mountains, is getting out and hiking. It's amazing. When you're in the mountain ranges down here, you're reminded of how small you are. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, I take a little break from social media and I go out and look at the mountains, and none of this shit's going to matter in 100 years. There'll be a whole new series of problems. So, just take our time, try to be kind and compassionate, especially with ourselves, which is always hard, and work through it. That's why I love what I do, because I know that it really works. I had, I won't share the names of the people that I had, but I had a young gentleman here that was voted one of Forbes top 40 under 40. He came down and he experienced the toad medicine. The toad is referred to as Bufo alvarius, or Colorado river toad.
Mm-hmm.
Mike Tyson has now been a huge advocate for it. It saved his life and changed how it's the active ingredient is 5-MeO-DMT.
They say it's very strong, and you've got to be in the right space, so to say.
So to just sum things up, when I had my head-on car crash when I was 19 years old, I had the out-of-body experience that I told you about, and I talked to my dead grandfather, and the white light and the energy. 20 years later, I smoked desert toad, Bufo alvarius. It recreated that out-of-body experience almost exactly, minus the trauma. So all the lessons from a near-death experience, expressing gratitude, realizing you're connected to everything, wanting to be kinder, all those lessons minus the trauma. So for me, toad is extremely powerful. 15 to 20 minutes, you smoke the secretion from this toad, and it'll give you a near-death experience or an out-of-body experience. Everybody's different, but many of the people that I work with have that, leaving their body and then realizing that they're more than just their body. They're more than just their traumas. And for me, it is the most powerful medicine. For me personally, I've worked with soldiers that have, PTSD, that have done 3 or 4 tours of duty in Iraq, and they're just completely traumatized, and they've had no way, and they don't want to talk about it. But the toad can help dig into those deep layers. It's like, I always tell people, if you're an intellectual and you have a therapist, you can steer the conversation. Sometimes you're smarter than your therapist, and you can manipulate the conversation. When you're dealing with plant medicines, you ain't manipulating shit. You're going to look at what you need to look at, and it's not going to be, you're not talking, you're feeling, you're going into those deep layers. And I feel when I have the toad, Johns Hopkins University has just started conducting more in-depth studies with the 5-MeO-DMT and studying the peptides that are found in this secretion. So there's more than just the psychedelic experience that's happening. So I had this young gentleman, Forbes top 40 under 40. He had the toad experience, and he just laid there as peaceful as could be for about 15 minutes. Some people flail their arms, and some people get up and, reach for the sky, and other people just lay there, some all different. He just laid there and he was quiet. And after 15 minutes, he opened his eyes and he sat up and he looked over at me, and he had tears streaming down his cheeks. And I'm like, are you okay? And I went over by him and he hugged me and he said, that's the first time in my life that I've ever been able to shut off my mind. And he was so grateful for that. He's like, I know now it exists. You know what I mean? So it's like some of the greatest minds that we have, like you hear people talk like Elon Musk or all these people that they're just so, they can't shut the brain off. It's like they're just go, go, go. And it's like, that's a form of, I don't want to say mental illness because the toad can help with this. Like I said, firsthand experience. I watched this young fella come out of his experience, and it's just the gratitude. And I still talk to him. The last time I talked to him, he's like, he'll never forget that experience because it's the first time in his life. He's tried meditation, he's tried yoga, he's tried all these different things, and it's like, it's never worked. But I almost feel like you don't need to smoke toad all the time. Maybe that one time opens the doorway or creates the pathway that now you can access it on your own. You know what I mean? Like I notice after having toad ceremonies a week or two after, I can sit and meditate and I kick back into almost like the feeling of the toad. So it's created that pathway that I can find that inner peace now in that light. So it's like, again,
it's like you've built the memory. It's a timestamp in your brain. You've had the experience, and now you can recreate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's beautiful. It's absolutely amazing. It's like, that's the best part of my job is to watch people have breakthroughs. And it's, again, I don't do anything. I just stand by. It's like, all I need to do is like, let them have that experience, and it's like, you're not doing anything. And that's the other thing with this type of work is you need to separate yourself. Terence McKenna, I don't know if you're familiar with Terence McKenna. But one of his quotes is my favorite of all time. It's follow plants, not gurus. And for me, it's like, it's perfect because some of the most therapeutic psilocybin sessions I've had, me eat the mushrooms, go out into nature alone. I don't need somebody, when you're a newbie and you're just coming into this, it's very scary. But once you learn how to work with psychedelics, you can work with them on your own as long as you're responsible. You can microdose. I know many people that are microdosing psilocybin down in the Silicon Valley. Almost all those programmers are microdosing LSD, psilocybin. I know fighters that are using it in sparring sessions because they're microdosing. They're seeing things before they happen. So it's like, I don't care what you believe.
Performance acceleration. It's like it's getting into flow state.
It's so exciting what is possible once we really understand the science behind what's happening within us, and while the different paths to tap into this peak performance or creativity or healing. I think we both acknowledge that there are multiple paths to expanding consciousness, and also it really depends on the readiness of an individual, the amount of time someone has to, get away and experience these things, as well as the risk that a person's willing to take to explore different avenues. It's something that's addressed in the book Stealing Fire by Jamie Wheel and Stephen Kotler. I want to ask you, what would you say is the number one thing that people need to work on?
Is self-love. Most people don't like themselves, unfortunately. I noticed that. Most people are extremely critical, and I don't know if they're carrying wounds from childhood traumas. And obviously that's where a lot of our wounds come from. And during the formative years, a lot of people have been told, unfortunately, this is just what I've seen through the work, that people they don't accept themselves. They don't like themselves. They want more self-love. They want to be kinder with themselves. Like, I know when I was going through all my things, like if I ever met somebody that talked to me the way I talk to myself, I'd punch them in the face. You know what I mean? Like, who is this person? It's like, but we talk to ourselves. We're so horrible. Like, you're a piece of shit, and you didn't do this right, and you didn't do that. So definitely number one, I would say, is self-love. A lot of people are missing, that self-love, and they're missing it from childhood or wherever it may be. That seems to be the number one. And then the number two, which is pretty much related to number one, is their interpersonal relationships. That seems to be a lot of people come down when they've had a bad breakup, or they're ready to have a breakup, or they're questioning, and it stems from, again, not loving themselves. So it's like you're constantly beating yourself up, and you have a partner that tells you how great you are. You're going to think either they're a liar, or you know what I mean. It's just, so definitely the number one is self-love and people looking for that. And then number two is trying to work through relationship problems, which, like I said, just stems back to your own problems. If you're usually, if you're happy with yourself and you can meet somebody, you can have a healthy relationship. But I see a lot of codependency that, I just had people on the last retreat that came as a couple, and it's like they didn't give each other space, and that's what my job is. And it's very hard when you've got two adults who are very successful to say, okay, we're going to have a timeout now. We're going to separate you guys. And it's like, have your own experience. Don't worry about what she's doing. And it's like, so sometimes I've seen, the psychedelics save relationships, but then on other times, if the relationship's not healthy, it usually shows people that it's not, and they have a separation. So those are the two big ones as far as like healing and what people want to do to heal. But what I've also found is a lot of the people that we've been gifted to work with are people that are looking to expand their consciousness and creativity, which is don't get me wrong, I love to help people heal, but I also like to work with people that are already fairly balanced, that like to go in deeper and expand. That to me is where it's fun at that point. It can be very difficult working with people when they're going through past traumas. It can be equally as rewarding. But my main goal with this project is to help the people that need healing, but also to bring leaders down here. I mean, we've had some very interesting characters come in and help those leaders sort of expand their consciousness and think of new ideas to help their communities and help the people around them. And that has that web effect where it's like we are all connected, so let's influence one another in a positive way. And there's a lot of power in that. So that's where my main focus is now. And like I said, when I look to guys like Tim Ferriss, which are donating and helping donate millions of dollars to MAPS, for any of your listeners, go check out maps.org, because they're doing some great research. It's an amazing website. It's finally starting to come into mainstream a little bit, which is good. It's not all like, oh, you're taking mushrooms. And, I always have people say to me, oh, Chris, you're just down in Peru tripping balls and getting high. And I'm like, come and have the experience with me and you'll see that it's not exactly getting high. It's actually deep, emotional work, shadow work. If you are familiar with Carl Jung, a lot of people that, are starting to see that people are bringing together the work of Carl Jung with psychedelic experience, all his shadow work, which is perfect, and it's like, you get into Joseph Campbell, the hero's journey. It's like, there's no bigger hero's journey for me than the psychedelic journey. That's a hero's journey because you are going into yourself, into the darkest parts, which is so much easier to tell your friends what they need to do and how they need to heal. But then when you look at yourself, it's like, oh, I don't like that. That's uncomfortable. It's like, yeah, then that too. It's like, I still get it. And I'm still like, you asked me about enlightenment. It's like some days I feel enlightened. Other days I feel like a Neanderthal. It's like,
you know what? And I love that you said that. That's honest. A lot of people who've had the awakening, or they're in the space teaching or coaching people, they try to maintain this facade that they're always in that space. And I just don't, I can't buy that, because you're having a human experience. So I believe in the soul. Obviously, if you can have an out-of-body experience, there is more to life than this, right? But I believe in our eternity, so to say. So when we're here having a human experience, we're obviously going to be having human emotions, and our days are so different. So there is no way that you can constantly be in an enlightened state. And, it's so important for people like you who are in the work, doing the good work, to say that, because it's real, and it also gives this sense of connection with whoever comes in.
And that's that's the environment I wanted to create. An honest environment it's not all love and light. There's a lot of hate and shadows. There's a lot of darkness. So let's look at that too. It's not that there's not love and light, but it's like, there's no finish line to this. And people say, oh, I just want to heal. It's like, you're never going to completely heal. life will traumatize you and smash you again. Just when you think that you're, oh, I'm fine and I'm perfect and now I've got that. It's the same as getting in physical condition. It's not like now I'm in good shape, I'll put that over there and I'm going to go focus on something else. No, you need to focus on that every day, because if you don't focus on it, you're going to lose it. And I've gone in and out, and that's one of my biggest pet peeves is these centers with these enlightened people that wear all white and it's like they're pure and it's all like, I'm not hating on that, but it's like, it's not my style. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, you can wear all white, Om Shanti, go to your ashram, do whatever you got to do.
You're the misfit. I love it. The rebel of the spiritual retreats. There needs to be a space for that, because I'm one of those people.
And I know you are. And I knew that when I talked to you at first, and there are more people like you. And I feel that people like you and myself, that we're not going to do the spiritual bypass. We're not going to wear all white. We're not going to, do our chants and just accept. We're going to seek our own path and seek our own knowledge. And we're going to be okay with that. And we're going to empower other people to do the same.
Absolutely.
That's my main missions. Like, let's drop all the pretentious, I'm healed and now bow to your guru. And, no. Life is the guru and it's going to teach you. And you need to listen to the messages that come in. And
life is the guru. Yes.
It truly is. That's the best teacher.
Mm-hmm.
We hold a space that let people have an experience, but then how they integrate is going to be their own choice. We're there to hold their hand for the first couple of days after, and I stay in touch with people. But you have to take your power back. You have to take your power back. Like, don't wait for somebody to save you. Like, my hospital trauma visits, like, I would be in a bed next to somebody that had half the injuries that I had, and I recovered twice as quick because they're waiting for the doctor to heal them. Like, the doctor's not going to heal you. Get in your wheelchair and start doing laps. Start doing workouts. Start doing some breath work. Like, eat healthy food, drink water. Like, take your power back. I see the guy in the bed next to me. He's like smoking a pack of cigarettes a day and eating McDonald's in his recovery. I'm like, you're in for a long recovery, dude. Like, you're going to go through depression because you're not getting proper nutrients and minerals. Like, these are all the things. And I believe that it's what you touched on. The problem is there's not enough education.
Yeah.
Too many people. Like, if you look back to our generation, like my parents, my grandparents' generation, it was just trust your doctor. Don't ever ask any questions. The doctor knows. Like, the doctor was put up on a pedestal. It's like, again, I've had great doctors and bad doctors. We can't just expect people to heal us for us. It's not.
Yes, absolutely. And I think there needs to be like a global challenge where people actually think about, with all this stuff about let's save the world, make it a better place, kumbaya style. Like, look, it's amazing. And I work with a lot of people who are doing some amazing impact work. Hats off to them. At least someone's doing it. But there's also a lot of preachers who aren't necessarily doing anything, and they're just kind of PR stunting the whole thing, right? So you need to be able to differ between the two. But in the space of healthcare, in the space of mental health, in the space of consciousness, there's so much the educational element, and also the tapping into the medical system, which is a whole other story, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's a whole other, and I mean, I know that you're following all the content around that, as am I. It's crazy. It's crazy what's happening. This COVID-19 is going to be the realization of, oh, maybe I should be trying new things to better my mental health. Maybe I should be exploring what the hell consciousness means, or being able to self-regulate, or what breath work means, and why people who are actually doing breath work feel more at ease versus me, and you can, yes, and you can see people asking these questions now, and I'm like, yes, this is awesome.
And, it could also be just moving, like getting up and moving from your chair or from the front of the TV for 5 minutes. That can shift your mood. A little bit of movement creates a dopamine release. I mean, this is not new to many people. It's out there in mainstream media now. Couple that with some nutritional knowledge. Couple that with some breath work if you're having a panic attack or you feel anxiety. And there you have it. As a unique human, you can explore for yourself the combination that works. And if you feel like you're centered or you're creating a more wholesome experience in your life, great. But if you feel like there is something missing, curious, you want to explore other avenues, well, psychedelics is another pathway to healing deep trauma, old wounds that you know is stifling your progress. Similarly, it's a great way to tap into creativity and almost see the peak of the mountain before even getting there. And so you see it, and then you're back in the human experience, and now you know that there's work to be done and you need to climb that mountain. You have tasted the sweetness of victory, so to say. So it's optional, but it's there, and I think that's an important statement to make.
I feel like people just need to know that it's an option to explore. And when you don't know anything about it, right, you need to...
You can explore it, and you don't have to be a hippie. You don't have to be a...
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
Stigma around it. It's like, the stigma around these medicines after the whole, Nixon, and basically psychedelics were forced underground. And that's why MAPS is so important, because we spent decades, because of some stupid politician who was completely ignorant of the benefits and, outlawed the psychedelics and outlawed the research. We lost, like all the research in psychedelics went underground. So when it goes underground, they're doing the best they can, but then it's not legit. It's not being, followed the way it should be. It's not being questioned. It's not, now, again, it is, it's like, because we can't group ayahuasca, wachuma, marijuana in with crack cocaine, heroin, like completely different. Though crack cocaine and heroin are meant to numb and, and sort of turn things down, like your pain. They numb your pain, they numb your consciousness, like alcohol numbs your consciousness. I'm not saying don't have a drink, but if alcohol is legal, then why the fuck are psychedelics illegal? Show me the detriment to psychedelics and people experimenting with their consciousness. If anything, we create more free thinkers that will come up with good solutions to modern problems. And instead, they're being outlawed and they're still being looked down upon, which is my biggest frustration. Even the fact that I'm in Peru, and in Peru, marijuana is illegal. It's like, well, we're allowed to drink ayahuasca. Like, who decides this, and who has the right to tell anybody what they do with their consciousness? It's like, that's a problem.
But you see, people, the thing is, people don't even know that the two are linked. And people don't even know the word consciousness is so heavy that when I use it sometimes, people just like, what are you talking about? And if you're not having those conversations, you just don't know. And then the minute you hear psychedelic, you automatically, your mind goes, oh, this is taboo. We don't need that. So if you don't have some information on one aspect of what this can do, which is the bigger picture, which is...
Ayahuasca ceremonies are a way of, one of the ways of being able to see the top of the mountain without necessarily climbing it. So you have this peak experience through the use of plant medicine, psychedelics, and be able to witness this extreme joy of, hey, whoa, we're much more than our bodies. But then how do you integrate when you come back down is the question. And also, why am I doing this? Is it just because it's this new fad, or what am I after? And the three things that I keep hearing come to mind is deep healing, increased creativity, and people who have a yearning for knowledge beyond the self, beyond this body.
A lot of education needed in that space. I want to talk a little bit about your shaman, Pepe.
So Pepe is our shaman who conducts all the ayahuasca ceremonies. He's featured in a documentary that's found on Netflix called The Last Shaman. So for anybody that's interested to sort of get an idea of Pepe's work, he's featured in that documentary. There's a lot of suspect characters in that documentary, but Pepe is... he comes from a long lineage of Shipibo shamans. So his tribe is referred to as Shipibo Kanibo, and they're located in just outside of a city called Pucallpa, which is down along the Amazon. He's from a village called Santa Rosa, which lays right on the border between Peru and Brazil. He comes from a fishing town. Now, Pepe's father was killed when he was just a young boy, and he went to live with his uncle. And his uncle is also a fairly famous shaman who works. He works in Italy and France. He travels quite a bit. He's starting to get older now, but he was taught by his father, and then passed it down to Pepe. Which I've worked with many different shamans since I've been down here, and Pepe is very special because Pepe, he's been through his own traumas. He's had his own struggles in his life, and he's helped heal himself and his community. Not all shamans are good, so I want to touch on that. I mean, I've worked with some shamans that, again, I've read a lot of Terence McKenna, and I always refer to him because I feel that he was sort of like the godfather of bringing psychedelics, one of them anyway. A lot of shamans can be tricksters. So they perform this beautiful ceremony, but they're not really doing it from a place of caring or wanting to help. And I'm a pretty good judge of character. And like I said, I've gone through probably about 4 shamans before I got to Pepe. And if you watch the documentary, and spoiler alert for those who decide to watch it, I am going to give a little bit of info about that documentary. It shows him trying to help people and heal. And there's an organization which labeled itself as nonprofit, which is probably a straight up lie because they weren't there for the profit. Pepe had a falling out, and he was actually kicked out of his village. And at the end of the documentary, it shows Pepe working in Lima, which is the capital of Peru. It's a city of about 10 million people. It's not the nicest place. It's very packed in. It's a full on city with a lot of shadows and a lot of dark parts to it. Pepe, at the end of the documentary, is shown working in a garage covered in grease. So here's this man who's a very powerful shaman, but he's also the type of man that he's going to do anything to provide for his family. And that's what I saw. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, that's one of those things that in Pepe, I saw this man who he's going to do anything to provide for his children, his wife, his mother. He's going to do anything. To me, that's somebody that's embodying what a strong figure is, a strong father figure. So for him, he's willing to do anything to provide for his family, but I think it would be a tragedy to not have him do what he's gifted to do, to provide for his family. Do you know what I mean? So we've done our best to try to send his village people. Like, I work with him here in the Sacred Valley. We fly him up to the Sacred Valley to work with us, but I also send people down to the jungle. And something that after COVID lifts, people that maybe can't afford the cushy, nice experience of having, a nice bed to sleep in. If people want to go and have the authentic jungle experience, we'll provide that as well, which will help Pepe's community. Like bringing them people. That's how they provide for their family. And, they're struggling right now, as most people are, because there's not people going to the jungle to have these ceremonies. Pepe's style is I'll give you a rundown on what a ceremony looks like. When working with Pepe, we have what's called a maloka. It's basically like a yoga temple or a little, enclosed area. They're different in the jungle. Here it's a little colder at night, so they're all enclosed. They're usually round. It helps, they believe, with the energy. I've worked in places that are long and sort of narrow, which are very bad because there tends to be things like when you're in the psychedelics, things hide in the shadows and in the corners, whereas with a round room, the energy tends to go up and out. There's like a little window at the top where you can feel the energy come up and out. So how we do it is Pepe usually goes in, and Kunti, part of our other team, the Mexican woman who works with us, they work together. So she supports him in the ceremony. So what we do is we set the beds up in a circle, and Pepe will go in with Kunti, and they smoke their tobacco pipes. So they have a tobacco down here called mapacho. Mapacho is believed to cleanse the area, much like a Palo Santo. They say a prayer, and it's always one of those things that people, different cultures. Where I come from, tobacco causes cancer, and it's, you know, a horrible thing. It's like not a healthy. It's not warding off evil spirits. It's actually giving you evil spirits. But they believe in the opposite. That through smoking the pipe, they say a prayer, and it's a tradition. So again, I respect that. But for some of our guests who are tobacco sensitive, which I am, you know, I can't be around it. We don't go in. We let them do the whole cleansing with the tobacco, and they say their prayer. And everybody comes in. And we make sure that everybody has at least an hour with the lights on to sit in front of Pepe. And he's very attentive. And what I've noticed is different with him from other shamans is he really listens and tries to understand what people are going through. And sort of what I try to help with is bridging the gap between how can a man who's grown up in the jungle understand the struggles of somebody in the Western world, whereas how can somebody in the Western world really benefit from these ancient medicines? Where can we bring them both together? Mm. So it's not too far to one side. So communication is the big one. So all of our guests communicate for at least an hour and set an intention. Very important before the ayahuasca. I always refer to an intention as almost like an anchor. Yep. So if the sea gets really rough and you're getting thrown around and, you know, you're in the psychedelic experience, you can put your anchor down that keeps you sort of, you know, you have something, a mantra to focus on. Breath work and having an intention are two very valuable tools for approaching an ayahuasca ceremony.
Give us an example of an intention.
I'll give you an example of how to set an intention and then how not to set an intention. So people that come down, you know what, it's like, people are like, one intention is, I want to have more love and compassion and patience with myself. Mm-hmm. I want to have love and acceptance for who I am and patience for myself. And that person will go over that. So when they're in the ceremony, I want love and patience for myself, and they can focus on that's what they want to get out of it. Whereas some people will say, well, I just don't want to hate myself so much, and I don't want to, and then they frame it in a negative aspect where all you hear is hate. I don't want to hate myself. Well, no, switch it to the positive so you're not even using that word. So when people approach something, really focus on what you want. Don't focus on what you don't want. And it seems simple, but you'd be amazed at how many intellectual people I've met. I just don't want to hate myself so much. And it's like, okay, well then what do you want? You know, so setting intentions, something like that. I don't want my mind to be so busy. No, I want to be able to quiet my mind. You know, so you frame it in the way of what you want, and you really focus on that. So when shit starts to get crazy, which it usually does, you have that to focus on, and then you're doing the work because you're actually targeting what you want.
Yep.
So that's my best advice for people. Whenever you work with any type of plant medicine, focus on what you want and what you want to get out of the experience. Don't focus on what you want to stop or what you want to. Don't focus on that. You need to move it in a positive direction. So, and again, it's so many people that's their intention. I want to love myself and have more patience.
Yep.
You know, because we're very impatient with ourselves. I know I am. Like, I want it now. I got to do this now. I'm not in good enough shape. I need to do this. I should have done that. I need to accomplish more here. And it's like, slow down, you know, find the balance so you're not on too far end of either side of the spectrum. So once the intentions are set, what will happen is Pepe will serve medicines. Now, sometimes we don't just serve ayahuasca. We do other plant medicine, what's referred to as dietas. Mm-hmm. So some people work with different types of plant medicines. You can diet everything from the tobacco plant, chichuasi. There's many different tamamori. There's different types of trees and plants that they use the bark. And I mean, this is a ancient study. I mean, there's so many different plant species in the jungle that we have no idea. I mean, that's where most of big pharma medicine comes from. They get it from the Amazon, synthesize it, patent it, make a shitload of money, and it's not as good as the real thing. So many different medicines that you can diet. But when we have people in the ceremony, if they're dieting another medicine, people will come up one after one and get their dieta medicine. Mm-hmm. And then afterwards, they'll come up for their shot of ayahuasca. Now, the way that we work with ayahuasca is we don't dose people too heavy at first, especially on the first night. We let them feel it a little bit. After an hour or two into the ceremony, if they feel they want a little bit more, it's there that they can take a little bit more. So it's almost like dipping your toes in. You don't want to put people in the deep end right away. You want to let them get a feel for it. We usually do 3 ceremonies in a row. so you'll get a chance to go deeper as the nights continue. So after the ayahuasca is served, we turn all the lights off in the Maloka. Pepe drinks the medicine, Kunti drinks the medicine, I don't drink the medicine. I'm usually positioned by the door, by the exit, just in case somebody decides to make a run for it. I'll go out with them, but it's like I'm kind of like the psychedelic shepherd. I keep people in the circle, and if they want to go look at the stars, I'll take them outside, but then bring them back in. So that's how we keep it safe. We keep the groups very small. I don't drink. I keep an eye on things. We also have a doctor and a nurse on call, which are about 10 minutes away if anything happens. We have an oxygen tank because we're here at elevation. I mean, right now I'm at 3,300 meters, which is about 11,000 feet. So, we have noticed that some people have a hard time breathing, so we have oxygen. We have everything that's, in place to keep people from having a panic attack. If they do have one, we have the tools, I'm usually pretty good at I know panic attacks very well, so I usually know how to help people chill and sort of mellow out a little bit. After the ayahuasca is drank, the lights go out. Pepe begins immediately to perform what's called an Icaros, which is a medicine song. And that song that he sings, I've never seen a shaman like him, because he will sing for an hour straight, and he's making sounds even as he's inhaling, so there's no break in the music.
Sounding.
It's like, how do you do that? I'm like, as he's breathing in, he's making it part of the song. So he forms this Icaros, and like I said, what you feel is some shamans, they'll let people sit in the dark for about an hour and wait for the medicine to kick in before they start to sing. Pepe calls the medicine out of you. He calls it out by using the Icaros, and you can literally feel the vibration of the song, and the room starts to come alive, and he's bringing it up. So he'll sing for an hour, and usually after an hour, the medicine is kicking in. That's when we offer people a little bit more if they would like more, and if they don't want more, then they can chill. Even some people don't drink the medicine, they just sit in the circle and notice huge effects just from being in the energy.
Yeah.
So then after the initial first, what's called an opening Icaros is performed, Pepe goes to the foot of the bed of each guest and sings for 20 to 30 minutes their own personal Icaro, which is based on their intention.
Oh, that's beautiful. That is so beautiful.
It's amazing because the benefit that we have having a small group is we can take time with each person. One-on-one time with the shaman, time to have somebody sing to you for 20 or 30 minutes is very therapeutic. And I always get people, if they can, if they're not, sometimes you get very dizzy with the medicine that you can't sit up and you're feeling like very, much affected by it. If you can, you sit up and put your face very close to Pepe, and he'll sing like literally a couple feet away from you, and you can feel. I've had nights where your body's...
That is amazing. That's a beautiful touch for the ceremony, by the way.
And that's, to most people, it's so profound, because I've literally had like one of my experiences with Pepe is he took me back, and it comes back to me having the reoccurring nightmare of this child in the burn unit, coming back to my story. Pepe worked with me, and I told him, like, going on away from my own advice at first was like, I told him, I don't want to have these nightmares anymore. And it's like, he's like, well, it's like, okay, what do you, I want to have nice dreams and good sleep. It's like, let me reframe, that's showing the enlightenment and the Neanderthal juxtaposition. It's like, okay, Neanderthal, no more bad dreams. It's like, so eventually I framed it in another way, and he sung to me, and he took me back to the children's burn unit. I was a child in that burn unit, and it was literally like, I thought, holy shit, this is going to be a brutal night. But it was like, I had to go back and see it. And like you said earlier, you have to face things and feel them before you can let them go. So I went back and realized in this moment, like, I was just a kid. There was no way I could have helped that child. And I had felt all this, like, I don't know if it was shame or guilt that had heard all this suffering. I felt helpless. It's like, you were helpless. So let it go. You were helpless. There was nothing you could do. You couldn't help the other child. You couldn't help yourself. And I wrote about this. I actually did a few journal entries where when he sang to me, it took me to that place. I experienced the horror and the tragedy and the suffering And then in a split second, it was almost like a vision of Mother Ayahuasca came to me and picked me up and carried me away. And we ended up spending the whole night flying around in the stars. And I just felt like it wasn't like I had to think about it anymore. I didn't have to focus on it. I just let it go. And I haven't had that nightmare since. So it's been over a year and a half now.
I'm so happy for you.
It's amazing. And it's like, for me, again, I have this viewpoint that I don't like it when people say, oh, will ayahuasca cure this? Will it cure that? I'm like, I always tell people, no, you'll have to do it. But sometimes it actually does heal. It helps you let go in a certain way that you can move forward.
It's what you said before. What you said was it shows you a pathway. And then you have to walk the path, which is with every kind of healing, like even healing through deep meditation. You know, when people say they're a healer, they're not a healer, they're facilitators of healing.
Yes.
Because
and I can't say, I just saw before we started our conversation, I saw something on my feed and it was like an advertisement, how to become a healer. Space. You know, that's what people, it's like I facilitate people to heal themselves. I create a safe space. I'm there if they need support, but they have to do the work. And it's even something that when I see somebody struggling in an ayahuasca ceremony, it's almost like, you know, your initial reaction is you want to go to them and help them. I never go to them and help them unless they ask for help. I tell them beforehand, try your best to work through this on your own. But if you need help, I'm here. So there's that. It's not like you're alone and you're going to suffer, but at the same time, don't just reach out for help. You know, like some people are like, oh, I need a glass of water. Oh, I need you to hold my hand. Oh, I need this. I need that. I need this. And they spend the whole night telling you what they need. And sometimes what they need is to help themselves. Like, obviously, I'm not going to let somebody throw up on themselves and if they need help to the bathroom. But when you're in that emotional process, sometimes it's better to face it alone. I mean, it's cliche and it's an analogy that's been used so many times, but it's true. It's like the cocoon for the butterfly. You know, like if you don't let it struggle and get itself out and help it, it's not going to be strong enough to live life. You know what I mean? It's true with the ayahuasca. Like, yes, I can hold your hand all night long and I can tell you it's going to be okay. Or you can hold yourself and hold space for yourself and learn to work through it, that you're not always going to need somebody. And again, I'm not saying that we don't need people from time to time, but I just feel some people, they underestimate their own power and they immediately reach for help when they maybe don't need it. You know what I mean? And it's like, and then they're going to always feel like they're dependent on somebody. They're not strong and independent enough. And again, I mean, some of us face tragedies that we need somebody to hold our hand. I get it. But, you know, balance, you know, you got to work a little.
It's the tough love. You're showing them some tough love.
Tough love, babe. All about the tough love.
That's true. I agree with that. Where would you tell people to go to find out more about your retreat?
Well, you can go to the website, which is earthmedicineexperience.com. So earthmedicineexperience.com. And on the website, there's a direct link to my Peruvian WhatsApp. So it has a direct link. So if anybody hears this and they want to know more, I love to talk to people. Like, I talk to people even if I know they're not coming to see me. I love working with people. I love hearing people's stories. So, you know, I had a gentleman that he didn't want to come to our retreat. He wanted to go to the jungle. I still spent hours talking to him to help him prep because I know how confusing it can be and how there's so little information. And the advice that I would give to people that hear this, don't refer to Dr. Google. Dr. Google will diagnose you and tell you all the horrible things about ayahuasca, and you'll have to talk to somebody who actually...
To be honest, Chris, I mean, I got your contact through a good friend, Joe. And
shout out to Joe.
Shout out to Joe. And I looked up several retreats in Peru when I was considering coming down. And I kid you not, I got the weirdest sense from some of the people who I'd spoken to from other places in Peru. And when we connected, I knew that you were authentic. And it's so important. This is a really important message for everyone listening, is that you've got to do your homework, because this is a new experience and you need to have a safe space. You need to be with the right kind of people who've got your back. And
that being said, that's a great point. And the right type of people, for some people, it may be the drum and feather crowd that wears all white and
absolutely.
yours. And if that's yours, go for it. But
find
if it's not,
find your tribe.
If
you want the tough love, Chris is your man.
And if you want just an honest, if you don't want the whole,
you're warm, Chris. You're so warm and open and lovely, and I like the balance of you. So,
and that's what, and honestly, I owe that. So come back to the very first of the conversation. I owe that to the pain and the trauma. It cracked me open. I had no choice.
But that's just it, right? Some of the best people who are doing some of the really good work needed on this planet have really suffered some deep trauma and have had to go through the process so that they know what other people are going through. They can empathize better. It doesn't come off as fake. It's more authentic because they've been there. They've been in those shoes. So
those are my best friends. I mean, my best friends are people that have suffered a lot, because I just find that they live life more in the moment, and they embody all the things that I guess some of these groups they've read about, but they haven't actually gained the wisdom of it. Yeah, you can read Siddhartha, but like that's great, and you can hear about like all the suffering. But if you go through it yourself, you're gonna understand it. You know what I mean? It's like, what's the Brene Brown that talks about, if you're not in the arena getting your ass kicked, I don't want your opinion.
Yeah.
And that's just, it's like, hey, if you're not in there putting yourself out there for the haters to judge you and for the people to slander you and tell you this and tell you that, it's like, I don't want to hear about it, because we can all sit behind our keyboards and have opinions, but until we're actually in the arena where people can see, then, it's like, it's a very powerful statement for me. It's like, my best friends are the people that have suffered and have overcome, because they don't care about the minuscule bullshit that's in our lives. Like, some people are so concerned if you swear or if you use this or you do that. And it's like, shouldn't be even on your radar about things to worry about. You should be more worried about how to help yourself and look at the issues of yourself.
Yeah. I love that. Yep, got to look at the issues of yourself. We're normally running. We're normally seeking escapism. How can we embody the best versions of ourselves while looking fear and trauma and pain in the face and using it as a tool to grow? What are the pathways that can help us heal and be more creative so that we can actually influence the world for good? We also want to reiterate that plant medicine, psychedelics, psilocybin, all of these different avenues is not for everyone. We encourage reading more research from credible sites on psychedelics. We talked about maps.org. We talked about Hopkins University. There's a lot of research in that space, and several of the Ivy League research centers as well. And there is a paper that was recommended by Jamie Wheel in one of his podcast interviews by Houston Smith. And he did a paper titled, "Do Drugs Have Religious Import?" And it was a 40-year retrospective. Really worthwhile your time if you're interested in that space. He was one of the founding researchers of psychedelics and consciousness. Thank you for listening to this podcast episode, and big shout out to Chris for sharing his stories so openly and bestowing us with all his wisdom and knowledge so that we can take it away and make educated decisions on how we choose to be more creative and how we choose to heal and really live our lives better day by day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Much love.
Much love.
Bye-bye.
Ciao, ciao.
Until next time, my friends, seek your truth and then live it. It takes some courage and a whole lot of love.